How's it going, everyone? This is the George here, and it's that time of the year again where we're gonna be doing some Halloween slash spooky slash horror reviews for the month of October. And I figured this year we're gonna start it off with a childhood favorite of mine that I have watched so many times throughout the years that I grew up with, and that is Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. This is the first of the many direct-to-video Scooby-Doo movies that have come out for many years. This movie came out in 1998. Hard to believe it's 25 years old already. And after a pretty noticeable hiatus, if you had grown up in the late 80s, early 90s, or 90s in general, you would know that Scooby Doo was kind of on a hiatus because the popularity of Scooby Doo went down in the late 80s, early 90s due to the Scrappy Doo era going on way too long, longer than it should have. And while A Puppet Named Scooby Doo was a pretty good Scooby Doo series, after that, there wasn't anything new Scooby related outside of that. I remember that Scooby Doo Hanna-Barbera special with 101 Arabian Nights that they did, although it's very hard to find. And I know they did like one episode of Johnny Bravo where Scooby crossed over with Johnny Bravo. But outside of that, we didn't get really any new Scooby Doo stuff between A Pup Named Scooby Doo and this movie. But when Cartoon Network came around and Time Warner purchased Hanna Barbera, Scooby reruns were very popular on Cartoon Network. Now I remember on Cartoon Network, even though I was born in the mid '90s and grew up in the late '90s, early 2000s, I remember on Cartoon Network they used to have Scooby Doo, Flintstones, the Jetsons. But I noticed that as other Hanna Barbera cartoons were appearing less and less and stopped appearing on Cartoon Network, Scooby Doo would always appear. Scooby Doo was very popular even after this movie came out. And I think this movie helped Scooby's popularity skyrocket and give us a lot more Scooby stuff. Because after this movie came out back in 1988, the following year we got Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost and Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders, and then we got a bunch of other Scooby-Doo direct-to-videos. In fact, I think we get at least one Scooby-Doo direct-to-video movie at least most of the time, at least once a year. I think the only time we didn't was 2002 when we got the live-action Scooby-Doo movie that came out in theaters, the one James Gunn did the screenplay for. Yeah, I should probably do that movie one of these days on this channel. But this was the movie that also helps show that you can do something different with the Scooby franchise, because the Scooby franchise is a pretty simple formula. Four teenagers and their pet dog travel around, solve mysteries, get chased by some bad guy dressed as a monster or a ghost. They unmask the guy, they find clues. Pretty straightforward formula. And I can see why it can get stale, even though it can be very popular and fun to watch. Because I love Scooby Doo. I grew up watching Scooby Doo. I have a ton of Scooby Doo DVDs. I have a ton of Scooby Doo VHSs still. I used to watch Scooby Doo all the time. But I can understand why it can sometimes get stale when you see it so many times. You run out of monsters and ghost ideas. You're not doing anything different. I think that's why Pup Named Scooby Doo was so refreshing compared to most other Scooby spin offs that came before it, because it did something different. And obviously, the thing that they obviously market a lot with Scooby Doo on Zombie Island is that the ghosts are real, which this isn't the first time that at least Shaggy and Scooby have faced real ghosts. Also, Daphne, because if you remember in the Scooby and Scrappy era, after Fred, Velma, and Daphne for a little while left the show and it was just Shaggy, Scooby, and Scrappy, they went on adventures where they were real monsters for a while. Then Daphne came back and they went with the typical bad guy in a mask. But then the 13 Ghosts of Scooby Doo went back to real ghosts. And then you had those TV movies that came out in the 80s, Scooby Doo and the Ghoul School, Scooby Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf, and Scooby Doo and the Boo Brothers, where they were real monsters. If you remember, Shaggy turned into a werewolf in one of those. So this isn't the first time, unless they have erased the Scrappy era from canon. I don't know like when the hate for Scrappy began or when it became noticeable. But yeah, I remember this movie being marketed. It was like on some of the Scooby Doo VHS tapes that have Scooby Doo episodes. They said like this time the monsters are real, kind of thing. But anyways, let's get to the movie's plot. I've been talking about Scooby Doo just in general. Let's get to the plot of Scooby Doo on Zombie Island finally. So the gang have gone their separate ways because they got bored of solving mysteries, which I guess is you can see as a creative metaphor for people getting stale with the Scooby franchise after a while. But basically, they got sick and tired of the same old bad guy in a mask, so they went on their career paths. So Fred and Daphne are running the show that Daphne's hosting, where she wants to capture real life ghosts on tape. And Fred comes up with an idea to reunite the gang when he sees Daphne misses the gang. And so Shaggy and Scooby, who got fired from being airport security, and Velma, who runs a bookstore that sells mystery books, they go on a journey to try to find real ghosts. And after getting the typical hologram projectors and bad guy masks, they are told about Moonscar Island by a girl named Lena, who brings them to the island. And we get more into our adventure. Now, one thing I will say about Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island is right from the beginning, the tone for this movie is set up because this is probably the darkest Scooby-Doo movie ever. And I say that including the 2 live-action movies that James Gunn wrote the screenplay for, because even though those movies have adult jokes in them, in R-rated PG, I know they wanted to make the first film rated R at one point, but honestly, I feel more intimidated by some of the sequences in here than the monsters in the live action movie. Right from the beginning, the Moat Monster, who is a costume bad guy, he is way more terrifying than any of the monsters that Mystery Inc. had faced in any of the Scooby-Doo series or TV movies that came before this movie. The tone, the build-up in this castle where the Moat Monster's chasing them, it's set up so well. How dangerous the Moat Monster is, breaking down doors, clawing at Fred as he's trying to help bring Velma and Daphne back up when they're dangling from the balcony. Just like the destruction this monster causes, trying to hurt Shaggy and Scooby, just set up very well. And it sets the tone that this is going to be a different Scooby-Doo movie, even though we see the mystery gang solving a mystery, getting chased by a monster. And we have the classic theme song, which is updated very well. I like this version of the Scooby-Doo theme song. And I will say the music choices in this movie are great. I love the Ghost is Here montage where they're solving mysteries and they're just unmasking bad guy masks, not getting real monsters. And obviously, when the whole big zombie thing happens later in the movie, the Terror Time Again sequence, fantastic. It's the songs are probably my favorite chase songs in the Scooby-Doo franchise. And another thing I will say, even though this is a darker movie, it still feels like a Scooby-Doo movie. Now the gang has more personality in this movie. There's more personality for Fred and Daphne specifically. I mean, they are more the main focus in this movie compared to other Scooby-Doo specials because it's Daphne and her show, and she wants to capture real life ghosts on tape, and Fred's trying to help her. But there's more personality to them compared to other previous Scooby-Doo shows and movies. So, and we see the gang finally growing up, like going on career choices. There's more character development. So I like that they did that. The animation, when I rewatched this movie, I noticed the animation, it has aged a little bit, I will admit. But at that time, it did look very well, and they did a lot more creative stuff with it for that time. But I mean, if you're going to compare this to another Warner Brothers movie, and by the way, this is like I said, this is a direct-to-video movie. This wasn't made for theater. But if you compare it to The Iron Giant, which came out in theaters a year after this came out, The Iron Giant is way better animated. But anyways, the animation looks really good, and the designs for the zombies and the monsters also looks terrific. But basically, on Moonscar Island, we find out that there's been these hauntings. Simone and Lena are the only ones that live on the island, along with the grumpy gardener Bo. They also meet some other suspicious characters besides Bo. Shock, the ferry driver, the grumpy fisherman, Snakebite Scruggs, and his boar Mojo. So I like that they're also setting up that there might be some suspects, letting us know that there may or may not be some real monsters before we discover there are real monsters. Or maybe it's some humans connected to the real life zombies. Who knows? But the best thing about this movie to me isn't the darker tone. It's not the terrific voice acting, which I will get into after I get into the backstory. It's not the better animation, it's not the terrific music choices and great score and character development for these characters and doing something different with the Scooby formula, which I love. It's the twist that this movie has. And the twist is that the zombies aren't the bad guys. Now, before this twist is revealed, if you notice in this movie, the zombies, outside of, I wouldn't even say chasing, but just following the gang when they appear, they're not hurting anyone. They're walking very slowly, but they're not trying to hurt anyone. In fact, at one point in the movie, during the Terror Time chase sequence, one zombie gives Shaggy a vine to swing on to save Scooby from quicksand. He's not even trying to hurt him. He's just like, tapping on the shoulders and like handing him the vine. So we know that the zombies aren't hurting anyone. In fact, there's a ghost of a Civil War guy that's warning them to get away. And at first, you think this is just the typical ghost, threatening the local kids to go away, or the detectives in this case. But it's a good build up to realizing the zombies aren't bad guys this time. And if you also notice, there's a lot of zombies in this movie, and they're from different eras. It's not just pirate zombies. You got some Civil War zombies. You got some zombies that are in tourist clothes, in settler clothes, in wedding clothes. I guess they went on a honeymoon. Some of the victims went on honeymoon to Moonscar Island. It's capturing that these zombies are from different eras, different decades and centuries. And then we find out that Simone and Lena are the real bad guys. And they turn into these cat creatures that are draining the life out of people they're luring to the island to maintain immortality. And the reason why they became these cat creatures was to get revenge on Morgan Moonscar and his pirate crew for causing the deaths of their friends. In the flashback sequence, it's revealed that Simone and Lena were part of a settlement that came to this island, but Morgan Moonscar and his pirate crew chased them into the bayou where alligators ate them. We don't see the alligators actually eating them, but it's basically hinted. And this is where the movie gets really dark because of two things. Number one, we find out that people got eaten by alligators, and that's why Simone and Lena went on a revenge quest against Morgan Moonscar. The second reason is when you're drain the life out of not just the pirate crew, but all these other people who are a lot more innocent than the pirate crew, is rather shocking. I mean, they're draining the life out of tourists. As I said, we saw some tourists, we saw some people that were going on honeymoons, people that were just coming here to become new settlers. And they had so many victims. It reminds me of a movie that came out 6 years later, The Incredibles. If you remember in The Incredibles, spoiler if you never saw The Incredibles, Syndrome lured a bunch of superheroes to his island and killed them. And he killed a lot of supers. Now, not as much as Simone and Lena drained the life, I'll say, out of all these people throughout so many centuries, but still. And that was a PG movie. This movie is not even PG. I think in Canada it's rated PG, but I know when it came out, I don't think it had a rating. This movie's a lot darker the more you realize it as you get older. I didn't realize as a kid how dark this movie really was. But to me, I find that to be one of the best twists in any movie. And I thought the way it was executed, the way it was set up, worked pretty well. Not the best setup, but pretty well. And it reminds us that this is a different kind of Scooby Doo than we were used to watching on Saturday mornings. And it turns out that Bo is really a detective that was investigating the missing disappearances. But yeah, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island is a different kind of Scooby movie project, whatever you want to call it, because we've gotten so many Scooby shows and movies. The voice acting is terrific, and they did a lot of replacing with the voice acting. For example, Casey Kasem, who has always voiced Shaggy, didn't come back because he wanted Shaggy to be a vegetarian, and Warner Brothers was against it. So Billy West came in, and Billy West did a very good job. I'm kind of surprised this is the only time Billy West voiced Shaggy. Frank Welker is the only one that returns. He voiced Fred in this one. Don Music, the original voice actor for Scooby-Doo, who had voiced Scooby for most of the time, passed away the year before. And so Scott Eanes, who would also later voice Shaggy, voiced Scooby. BJ Ward voiced Velma. I think she might have been the weakest voice actor of the main gang, but she still does a pretty good job. And Mary Kay Bergman voices Daphne in here, and she does a very good job. You also got the voices of Mark Hamill. He plays the grumpy fisherman, Snakebite. You got Tara Strong voicing Lena in here, one of the cat people in this movie. Although when I was watching the credits, I noticed her last name was not Strong in here; it was something different. So I'm pretty sure that was before she got married or something. But yeah, the voice acting for the most part is terrific in this movie, especially when you're getting a bunch of new voice actors to voice these characters for the first time. I think the only two voice actors that that previously voiced these characters was Frank Welker, who did the voice of Fred since the original Scooby-Doo, and the only time he didn't was a pup named Scooby-Doo, and BJ Ward, who did the voice of Velma in the Johnny Bravo Scooby-Doo crossover. But yeah, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. If it wasn't for this movie, we wouldn't get so many Scooby-Doo direct-to-videos. We probably wouldn't have gotten the many Scooby video games we had gotten after that, the Scooby-Doo shows that we got after that. And I think this movie is proof that if you do something different with Scooby-Doo, while still keeping some of the Scooby-Doo qualities that we love, but changing it up, doing something different, adding more character development to our gang of five, you can keep this franchise alive and do something special. Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island is something special. Outside of a few animation eras, the animation looking like it's aged a little bit. A couple of things kind of felt rushed. For example, the reveal of Jacques being one of the cat people and being in league with Simone and Lena. I don't know, something about that for some reason. Even as a kid, I was like, this kind of felt off. It kind of felt like a last minute decision to make it more convenient or something for the plot. But outside of those few things, I love this movie. I try to watch this movie at least once a year. If there's one Scooby thing that I will definitely keep watching, it's Scooby on Zombie Island. Even though it's a direct-to-video movie, it's better than most of the cartoon movies. Well, movies based on cartoons that have come out in theaters. I mean, some of the Nickelodeon movies that we have gotten based on Nickelodeon cartoons, some of the Cartoon Network movies based off some of the Cartoon Network shows. Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island is way better. I think if you can maybe tweak the animation a little bit more, it would look great on the big screen, in my opinion. I wouldn't mind seeing Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island on the big screen. I think that'd be a fun experience. And overall, I'm going to give Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island an A. This is a great Scooby-Doo movie and project that does so well with the concept of the monsters being real. And that Scooby-Doo Returns to Zombie Island movie is not canon in my head. I'm sorry that movie does not exist in my opinion. I know about that movie. I've seen that movie. I don't even think I'm ever going to talk about it on this channel because I don't want to revisit it. It spit on this movie. But you know what? Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, great movie, great part of my childhood that still holds up for me. And what are your thoughts on Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island? Did you love it? Did you hate it? And what's your favorite Scooby-Doo project? Let me know in the comments down below. And I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe. If you haven't already, please share us with someone that loves Scooby-Doo. And I hope to see you guys real soon. Take care, everyone.